On October 14, 2014, 26-year-old nurse Khloe Reed finished her night shift in Portland, Maine, and disappeared without a trace. For 6 years, she was presumed dead, and the case was considered hopeless, until in August of 2020, a technical committee opened the locked basement door at the Owl's Head Lighthouse. What they saw inside defied logic. Khloe was alive, but chained to the wall with an industrial chain in complete darkness. You will find out who turned the navigation structure into a torture chamber and why the kidnapper chose it in this video. The events in this story are presented as a narrative interpretation. Some elements have been altered or recreated for storytelling purposes. On October 14, 2014, at 7:35 in the morning, 26-year-old Khloe Reed officially closed her shift in the intensive care unit of the Maine Medical Center in Portland. According to the investigation reports, the morning of that Tuesday was typically cold for the time of year, and the humidity created a dense fog that greatly limited visibility on the roads. Khloe's colleagues, including Nurse Jessica, in their later testimony, noted that she looked physically exhausted after a 12-hour shift, but remained focused. Khloe was known for her exceptional meticulousness and dedication to her patients. She often stayed late to personally check the monitors in the critical care wards, where the monotonous beeping of ventilators created an oppressive atmosphere of constant tension. CCTV cameras installed above the hospital's main entrance captured the girl leaving the building at 7:37 in the morning, holding a large glass of black coffee in her right hand. She was wearing a blue medical suit over a dark gray fleece jacket, and her hair was in a tight bun, which was recorded in the detective's reports as number 342. At 7:42 in the morning of October 14, 2014, the phone of Patricia Reed, the girl's mother, vibrated with a text message in which Khloe wrote that her shift was finally over and she was on her way home. It was the last confirmed message sent from Khloe's mobile device before the connection was cut off for good. When the girl did not show up for breakfast at 9:30 in the morning, the first wave of anxiety settled in the Reed home. Khloe's father, Daniel, recalled in the official sheriff's report that Khloe never broke the schedule without calling first, as he knew about her mother's chronic illness and her sensitivity to stressful situations. At 10:15, Daniel Reed arrived at the medical center on his own. He began to inspect the parking lot of Sector B, where the intensive care staff usually parked. He found his car, a white Toyota SUV, at the far end of the parking lot, about 0.3 of a mile from the main entrance. The car looked completely untouched. The doors were locked with the central locking, and the alarm was activated. Through the windshield, Daniel could see Khloe's work bag lying on the front passenger seat, and next to it, her nurse's badge with a smiling face and the words, "Khloe Reed, RN." The same paper cup of coffee was in the cup holder next to her, and it was completely cold by then. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken glass or traces of blood on the asphalt. It looked as if she had simply stepped out of the vehicle and disappeared without a trace into the white wall of fog that enveloped Portland that morning. At 11:45 in the morning on October 14, 2014, the first patrol crew of the Portland Police Department arrived on the scene. The officers immediately cordoned off the parking lot with yellow tape and began a protocol review of the scene. Detective Anderson noted in his notebook that the asphalt around the car was wet but clear of foreign objects. That same day, at 13 o'clock, a search operation was launched involving more than 60 volunteers and specialized ranger units. The main vector of the search was directed to the territory of the Four River Sanctuary Park, which borders the hospital complex and is famous for its intricate paths and dense bushes. The eerie silence of the forest that prevailed that day only increased the tension among the participants of the operation. The canine teams that arrived at the scene at 14 hours and 30 minutes reported a strange detail. The dogs confidently picked up Khloe's scent near the driver's door, followed it along the parking lot for 450 feet, but near the border with the forest, the scent suddenly stopped, as if the girl had taken to the air. It was a dead zone where even the most advanced equipment could not detect any heat signature or biological marker. Search teams worked until late at night using powerful searchlights whose beams cut through the fog but found only emptiness and wet leaves. According to the official conclusion of the investigators, recorded in the case number 87423, Khloe Reed disappeared under unexplained circumstances between 7:42 and 8 in the morning. Over the next 24 hours, the police began to work out the version of the involvement of the girl's ex-boyfriend, Lucas Brown, in the disappearance. According to Khloe's close friend, who was interviewed at 16 on the same day, it became known that their breakup had been painful and was accompanied by numerous attempts by Lucas to re-establish contact. Witnesses claim to have seen a dark sedan similar to Lucas's car near the hospital 2 days before the incident. Detectives searched Brown's home but found no direct evidence of his guilt, although his condition during the interrogation was described as nervous and unstable. Police continued to check surveillance footage from surrounding gas stations and stores, hoping to see a familiar silhouette of a white SUV or dark sedan that might shed light on the direction of the hijackers' travel. Each hour of waiting decreased their chances of success, and the cold rain that began on the evening of October 14, 2014, finally washed away any microscopic evidence from the parking lot asphalt. Khloe's family was in a state of complete psychological paralysis, rereading her last text message over and over again, which now looked like a coded farewell. The light that Khloe brought to her patients every day faded into the Portland fog, leaving behind only an empty car, cold coffee, and hundreds of unanswered questions. The documentary accuracy of the investigation at the time pointed to only one thing. A 26-year-old woman had disappeared into the heart of civilization as completely as travelers disappear into the unknown thickets of distant reserves. And the mystery of her disappearance was locked away somewhere so deep that even professional searchers felt helpless in the face of this silence. On August 20th, 2020, at 11:15 in the morning, a scheduled commission to assess the technical condition of hydraulic structures arrived at the Owl's Head Lighthouse, located on the rocky coast of Maine. This facility, built in the 19th century, had been considered automated for years and did not require constant staff presence. But according to new safety regulations, each technical area had to undergo a thorough inspection. One of the commission members, engineer Robert Miller, later recalled in an official report that an unusually thick fog was over the sea that morning, and the air was so humid that the sound of footsteps on the metal stairs seemed muffled and unnatural. During the inspection of the basement where the old fuel tanks were located, the inspectors noticed a strange architectural discrepancy. According to the building plan, the rear wall of the maintenance compartment should have been 3 feet thinner. A closer inspection revealed a heavy metal door carefully disguised as a paneled panel and locked with a sophisticated mechanism with 3 bank-type locks. The commission was forced to call a rescue team, which at 11:45 used industrial tools to open the barrier. When the heavy steel gave way, a stream of heavy, stagnant air burst from the gap, carrying a persistent odor of mold, unwashed human flesh, and pungent chemical antiseptics. Inside the hidden basement room, no more than 25 square feet in size, a person was found. It was Khloe Reed, who disappeared 6 years ago. She was sitting on a thin, dirty mattress, lying directly on the concrete floor. According to the medical examination report at number 19, fraction 20, the subject was in a state of critical muscle atrophy. The girl was so emaciated that her ribs were clearly visible through the thin, dirty fabric of the hospital gown she still wore. Khloe's skin had a specific waxy, almost transparent hue, which is a characteristic sign of years of complete lack of natural sunlight. Her eyes, accustomed to pitch blackness, reacted painfully to the flashlight beams, so she instantly covered her face with her hands, making only soft, sobbing sounds. The most frightening detail captured on the policeman's camera was her left leg. It was locked with a massive industrial chain, one end of which was tightly embedded in the concrete base of the wall with an anchor bolt. The rescuers recorded the girl's state of acute panic and deep psychological dissociation at any attempt at physical contact. She did not answer questions, did not recognize her own name, and was constantly swaying from side to side in a monotonous rhythm, indicating a complete destruction of her personality. The inspection of the place of detention revealed a system of total control. A hidden video camera was installed at the height of human height, working through an encrypted communication channel, allowing the kidnapper to observe the victim 24 hours a day. On the concrete wall hung a symbolic detail, an old calendar for 2014, where the date of October 14 was circled with a red marker with the inscription, "Beginning of Preservation." During a detailed analysis of the conditions of detention, forensic experts seized a key clue that later changed the course of the entire investigation. The chain lock that clamped Khloe's ankle was made using modified parts of a medical external stabilizer. Experts identified a laser engraving on the metal with the inventory number of the main medical center where Khloe worked before she disappeared. This part was not just a restraint tool, it had been professionally modified with a heavy industrial weld, requiring specific metalworking skills and access to hospital warehouses. At 12 hours and 30 minutes, Khloe Reed was taken to the intensive care unit of the same hospital where she had left 6 years earlier. The city of Portland was once again plunged into an atmosphere of anxiety as it became apparent that the person who kidnapped the nurse was not a random maniac, but acted methodically, using professional tools and knowledge to create the perfect prison under the light of a lighthouse beacon. The investigative team immediately began searching the area within a 1-mile radius around the Owl's Head Lighthouse, looking for any trace of the owner of the premises, who managed to remain invisible to the world for 600 days, keeping his victim literally behind the wall of the maintenance compartment. Each step the detectives took up the rusty lighthouse stairs brought them closer to the realization that this discovery was only the beginning of a much larger and more terrifying scheme of obsession. On August 21, 2020, at 9 o'clock in the morning, less than 24 hours after the shocking discovery of Khloe Reed in the concrete basement of the Ocean's Head Lighthouse, the investigation officially entered the phase of aggressive interrogation of the prime suspect, Lucas Brown. The Portland Police Department focused all available resources on the technician, whose professional skills and complicated past relationship with the victim created the perfect documentary picture of the crime. Lucas was in a state of complete psychological impotence, recorded in the detectives' reports as a state of deep emotional collapse due to the absolute inability to document his own innocence. The absence of direct biological evidence, such as fresh fingerprints or epithelial samples in the basement of the lighthouse, did not remove his suspicions, but only created a vacuum in which his every word was subjected to total deconstruction and doubt. Interrogation room number 4, where Brown was held, was a room of exactly 140 square feet, with cold gray concrete walls and a massive metal table that was bolted to the floor with steel bolts. According to a police sergeant who conducted the initial surveillance through a one-way mirror, Lucas sat completely still for 5 hours and 40 minutes, staring at a single point on the wall, which detectives interpreted as a sign of deep inner tension or careful preparation for a lie. The police exerted continuous psychological pressure on him, using official confirmations of his professional activities at the main medical center. Investigators had detailed work schedules and electronic access reports to engineering equipment warehouses, which confirmed that Brown had unimpeded access to medical stabilizers and industrial tools. The main technical clue was the same chain retainer found on Khloe's ankle. Forensic experts found that the device had been modified using professional argon arc welding equipment, and the welds had a specific pattern that Lucas's colleagues called the master's handwriting. On August 22nd, 2020, at 14 hours 45 minutes, the second, more grueling stage of the interrogation began, lasting 9 hours in a row. Investigator Johnson asked Brown directly about his knowledge of the topography of the area around Owl's Head, to which Lucas, according to the official reconstruction of his testimony, replied in a barely audible, trembling voice that he had only repaired equipment to save lives and had never created cages for people. However, these words only increased the pressure of the detectives, who reminded him of the 7-mile distance between his private home and the Lighthouse, a distance that could be traveled at night in less than 15 minutes without being seen by patrolling crews. Lucas's social life began to disintegrate with documentary inevitability within the first 48 hours of his detention. His neighbors in the Portland suburbs described him in official interviews with the press and police as a shadow, always disappearing into his enclosed 300-square-foot garage to work on heavy metal. One of his neighbors, Eleanor, said in her testimony that she repeatedly heard the distinctive sound of a welding machine and saw blue flashes of light at 2 in the morning throughout September 2014. But at the time, she thought it was just a sign of over-engagement with his work. This testimony became another weighty brick in the wall of accusation that the detectives were methodically building. The suspect's state of complete helplessness was reinforced by the fact that his alibi for the night of the abduction on October 14, 2014, was virtually non-existent. He claimed that he was at home alone and asleep, which could not be confirmed by any technical source or witness testimony. The investigation also noted in the report that during the entire 6 years of Khloe's captivity, Lucas Brown made no official attempt to inquire about the progress of her search, which Detective Lambert interpreted as the cold indifference of a professional detainee. The official report of the criminal psychologist described Brown as a man with an extremely high level of technical intelligence, capable of prolonged social isolation and cold methodical planning of every step. Every time he mentioned the details of his professional biography, new facts about his obsession with mechanical restraints were revealed. In their reconstructions of the conversations, the staff of the medical center's technical department recalled how Lucas had once jokingly said in 2013 that the human body was just a biological mechanism that needed proper external stabilization. Despite the fact that Brown continued to deny his guilt during 12 hours of continuous interrogation on the second day, his final innocence was not proven, forcing the police to keep him as a prime suspect in complete isolation. The evening of August 22, 2020, ended for Lucas in a pre-trial detention cell, where the only sound was the rhythmic patter of water drops, reminding him of the deadly silence of the dungeon that he, according to the investigation, had arranged with his own hands for his ex-girlfriend. The tension in the case reached its peak as the entire city demanded immediate retribution for the 6 years of suffering of the nurse, and Lucas Brown was the only figure who at that time fit the profile of the executioner perfectly, with an engineering degree and access to closed facilities on the coast. His bank accounts were frozen, and the front door of his house was sealed with yellow police tape, symbolizing the complete collapse of his former existence. While forensic scientists continued to examine every millimeter of the weld on Khloe's chain under microscopes, Lucas remained locked in a justice system that no longer believed a word he said, considering his silence to be just part of a well-thought-out script by a professional kidnapper. Each hour in the cell only increased his sense of impending disaster, as documentary evidence of his presence in the hospital and his skills with industrial steel created a noose that was tightened more and more with each new forensic report. Before we continue to investigate this gruesome case, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and like this video. This is extremely important because YouTube's algorithms see your activity and help promote this content, so even more people can learn the truth about the tragic fate of Khloe Reed. On August 26, 2020, the medical staff of the intensive care unit where Khloe Reed was staying recorded critical changes in her condition, which was described in official reports as deep psychological destruction and complete loss of identity. Staying in an isolated box under the round-the-clock supervision of 2 armed officers did not bring her relief. On the contrary, every manipulation by doctors caused her to experience bouts of uncontrollable terror. According to Dr. Miller's findings, Khloe suffered from the most severe form of post-traumatic stress disorder, which manifested itself in the form of constant dissociation. The girl often fell into a state of numbness, during which her eyes remained open but did not focus on any object, and her body began to sway rhythmically from side to side, an automatic reaction developed over 6 years of being confined to the Lighthouse basement. During the brief periods when she regained the ability to speak, her voice resembled a barely audible whisper, and her words were often jumbled, creating a picture of a torn consciousness. The most chilling element of her testimony, recorded in Protocol number 48723, was the memory of a masked man appearing in the twilight of her concrete prison. Khloe described him not as a living person, but as a shadow without a face, sometimes wearing a black tactical balaclava and sometimes a heavy rubber mask that completely erased any human features. The kidnapper acted methodically and never allowed her to see his eyes, which created the illusion of a complete loss of privacy and control. Investigators documented that during such visits, the girl smelled a persistent, intrusive odor of sedative medications, which became the smell of death for her. Khloe, as a professional intensive care nurse, instantly identified these chemical compounds. They were propofol and midazolam, drugs she used daily in her work to put patients into a state of medication-induced sleep. The realization that the instruments of rescue in the hands of her abductor had become instruments of torture caused her to suffer from acute nausea and panic attacks. She recalled how, after the next injection, time ceased to exist for her, and the walls of the 25-square-foot concrete bag began to shrink, turning the Lighthouse into a hermetic capsule of absolute pain. This information was crucial for the detectives, as it greatly strengthened their suspicions of Lucas Brown, who, as an equipment maintenance technician, had unimpeded access to the main medical center's pharmacy warehouses and knew the dosage protocols for these drugs. Any metallic scraping in the medical center, whether it was the clanging of tools or the movement of a medical cart, would trigger her attacks of acute terror, instantly bringing her back to the sounds of shackles locking in the Lighthouse basement. Khloe's psychological state was so fragile that she refused to sleep unless a police officer remained in the room, fearing that the shadow would return to finish what it had started 6 years earlier. Her skin, covered with ring scars from the shackles on her knuckles, documented a systemic abuse that lasted over 2,190 days. Detective Lambert recorded in an internal note that the victim showed classic signs of complete submission and severe Stockholm Syndrome. She was not afraid of detectives. She was panicked about the consequences of her absence from prison, as if her captor could see her even through the walls of the hospital. Each flashback revealed new facts about how the kidnapper manipulated her reality, using her own professional knowledge against her. Khloe recalled how he quoted passages from her biology textbooks, which she had taken with her on that last day of October 14, 2014, creating the illusion of his complete omniscience. The eerie silence that now surrounded her in the ward was louder than any cries for help, and the smell of antiseptics reminded her of the sterile cleanliness of her cage under the light of the lantern. The psychologists emphasized that her mind had been literally erased by years of isolation, and she was now just a physical shell of a person whose mind remained chained to the concrete floor at the Owl's Head Lighthouse. Any attempt to talk about the future only resulted in trembling in her hands and a quiet repetition of the phrase that she had to go back so they wouldn't be angry. The investigators realized that time was working against them. While Khloe was locked in her memories of the metal chain and the smell of drugs, the kidnapper could prepare a new phase of his project, using his invisibility as his main weapon. Every detail of her psychological destruction was further proof that the person who did this had a cold, engineered mind and an impeccable knowledge of human physiology, which led detectives again and again to the door of the hospital's technical department where Lucas Brown once worked. Would you like me to move on to Chapter 5, where the investigation is expanded and the first clues to the weld technique are revealed? On August 28, 2020, at 9:30 in the morning, the Portland Police Department's investigative team officially acknowledged that the Khloe Reed investigation had reached a state of dangerous stagnation. Despite the fact that Lucas Brown remained under constant surveillance and was subjected to repeated interrogations, numerous searches of his private garage, and a detailed analysis of all digital media provided no direct evidence of his presence at the Ocean's Head Lighthouse over the past 6 years. Detectives felt a growing anxiety, which was described in official reports of the period as a state of extreme tension due to the high risk that the real culprit could get away with it due to the lack of hard evidence. The complete absence of biological traces of the suspect in the lighthouse basement indicated that the kidnapper had acted with manic caution, using professional disinfectants and likely protective suits to avoid leaving any particle of epithelium or hair in Khloe's prison. It was at this point that the focus of the investigation radically shifted to the results of an in-depth technical examination of the metal bracelet, recorded in the Forensic Laboratory Protocol number 72, fraction 409. Mark Stevens, a leading expert in metallurgy, found that the weld that connected the medical stabilizer to the massive industrial chain was made using a very specific arc melting technique in an inert gas environment. This method ensures maximum resistance of the structure to aggressive environments and is usually used exclusively for the restoration of navigation structures, port cranes, and hydraulic facilities that are in constant contact with salty seawater. This detail became the very key clue that led the police to expand their search far beyond the personal circle of Khloe Reed and Lucas Brown. In his later testimony, Detective Graham noted that the realization of this fact caused the team to have mixed feelings. On the one hand, professional excitement. On the other hand, an understanding of the enormous scale of the work, because now it was necessary to identify and verify every contractor who had access to the technical specifications of lighthouses on the Maine coast over the past decade. On September 11, 2020, at 14 o'clock sharp, a large-scale operation to check the archives of the Coast Guard and the Department of Marine Facilities began. Investigators were looking for someone who possessed a unique and frightening combination of skills: a deep knowledge of industrial welding technology and a complete understanding of the logistics of the interior of the Maine Medical Center. Simultaneously with the technical inspection, the police began to study extended lists of patients who underwent rehabilitation or long-term treatment in the intensive care unit between 2012 and 2014. The detectives put forward a theory that the kidnapper could have been one of those whom Khloe cared for with the same sincere concern mentioned by her colleagues. It had to be someone who had enough free time and motivation to methodically study her daily schedule, her usual routes between hospital buildings, and the exact location of her car in the far parking lot. A list of more than 50 people whose professional qualifications and work experience matched the weld found on the chain was identified. Each name on this list was accompanied by a detailed analysis of the alibi for the night of October 14, 2014. As investigators crossed off names in succession, tension in the Portland investigation headquarters reached its peak. The atmosphere in the office was oppressive. Detectives worked 12-hour shifts, spreading out detailed diagrams of lighthouses, photographs of modified chains, and maps of the coastal zone within a 10-mile radius of Owl's Head on large desks. They were trying to find the exact intersection where a professional welder could have turned into an insulator hijacker. An important detail was the analysis of the chain itself. 80-grade hardened steel, which is commonly used for mooring ships in deep water, indicated that the criminal had free access to specialized industrial warehouses or worked in the port infrastructure sector. Each new clue discovered by the forensic team made the suspect's image more specific, technically savvy, and dangerous. The investigation realized that they were not looking for a random maniac, but a man with a cold engineering mind who used the lighthouse as the perfect laboratory to conduct his inhuman experiment of complete isolation of the individual. The documentary precision with which the basement room was set up, from the hidden ventilation to the video camera's self-powered system, indicated that every second of Khloe's stay in the dark had been calculated many months before her disappearance. The police continued their methodical work, hoping that the specific arc-melting pattern on the bracelet would finally lead them to a specific person who had remained invisible to the whole world for 6 years, watching his victim through the camera lens in the absolute silence of the ocean coast. On September 15, 2020, at 9:30 in the morning, the Portland Police Investigation Team officially began the final stage of analyzing the list of suspects, which at that time numbered more than 50 people. The atmosphere at the investigation headquarters, as recorded in internal protocols, was extremely tense, as every day of delay gave the real perpetrator a chance to escape. The identification process was carried out by methodically and coldly rejecting candidates due to the lack of a confirmed alibi or a complete lack of critical professional skills. It was during this documentary filtration that the detective's attention was drawn to the figure of 37-year-old Owen Murphy, whose biography turned out to be a unique and eerie combination of technical qualifications and personal connection to the victim. According to the archival records of the Department of Marine Facilities and the Coast Guard, in 2012, Owen Murphy, working as a leading industrial welding specialist at North Atlantic Marine, was directly involved in a large-scale overhaul of metal structures and corrosion protection of internal compartments at the Owl's Head Lighthouse. Technical reports from the period, signed by Murphy himself, confirmed that he had round-the-clock and unimpeded access to all levels of the structure, including hidden basements and fuel tanks located below the level of the rock. In addition, the internal audit found a critical administrative oversight. After completing the work in November 2012, Murphy did not officially return a duplicate key to the technical floor and service entrance to the lighthouse. His explanatory note, recorded in the logbook under the number 812, stated that the key was allegedly accidentally lost during a severe storm on the North Pier. The investigation revealed that the locks at the facility had not been changed since the incident due to budgetary constraints. The next fundamental clue came from a detailed examination of medical records and visit logs from the main medical center. Investigators found that in August 2014, just 2 months before the abduction, Owen Murphy was undergoing a long-term rehabilitation course after a complex work-related shoulder injury, and Khloe Reed was assigned as his primary nurse. The testimony of Khloe's colleagues, recorded in the reconstruction of events from September 20, 2020, indicated that Murphy's patient showed unhealthy, obsessive attention to the girl. Nurse Sarah recalled that he was constantly asking about which roads Khloe took to get to work, whether she stayed for night shifts, and where she parked her white SUV. An important detail found in the hospital's archives was an official complaint that Murphy filed against technician Lucas Brown during his treatment. In this document, he accused Brown in an extremely aggressive manner of unprofessionalism and negligence when setting up physiotherapy equipment. The detectives regarded this act as a deliberate attempt to discredit a potential competitor and create a negative reputation in advance around the person he planned to frame in the future. On October 11, 2014, exactly 3 days before Khloe Reed disappeared without a trace, the CCTV cameras of the Seaside Supply Store, located 2 miles from the harbor, recorded Owen Murphy at 16 hours and 20 minutes. The grainy footage, bearing camera number 4, clearly showed a man in a blue work jacket buying a set of high-strength industrial bolts, anchors, and a specialized compound for quickly fixing metal to concrete. These items were identical to those used to attach the chain in the Lighthouse basement. In his testimony, the shop assistant noted that the client was calm and professional, demanding marine-grade steel that could withstand extreme loads and humidity. The specific argon arc welding technique found on the bracelet that clasped Khloe's leg, when compared to archival samples of welds made by Murphy at the shipyard, showed complete identity of the technical handwriting. Every millimeter of melted metal on the victim's shackles literally screamed of the involvement of a specialist who was used to working with navigation equipment. In an internal memo, Detective Graham emphasized that Owen Murphy had the perfect set of resources to commit this crime. He knew the layout of the lighthouse like the back of his hand, had a working key, was skilled in creating unbreakable metal structures, and had a personal file on the nurse, which he methodically studied during his 30-day hospital stay. Every step the detectives took in studying Murphy's past revealed new facts about his preparation. From secretly following Khloe after discharge to calculating the exact time of the guard change at the lighthouse. Owen Murphy's status as the prime suspect was finally confirmed on September 22, 2020 at 18 o'clock sharp. This allowed the police to move from passive information gathering to the phase of active development of the offender, including the preparation of a warrant for a full search of his private residence. The combination of technical evidence, hospital visit logs, and video footage from the hardware store left no doubt. Owen Murphy was the shadow without a face who, 6 years ago, decided that he had the right to turn Khloe Reed's life into a closed project in complete darkness under the beacon light of the Owl's Head Lighthouse. The investigation was preparing for the final blow, realizing that behind the door of Murphy's house could be even more gruesome evidence of his years-long obsession, which had remained invisible to the entire state for 2,190 days. On September 23, 2020, at 6 o'clock in the morning, a Portland police SWAT team, together with technical experts from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, began an authorized search of Owen Murphy's private residence, located in a quiet suburban neighborhood 4 miles from the rocky coast of Maine. The official report of the scene, number 112 fraction 7, recorded that the exterior of the house did not stand out among the neighboring cottages, but the interior was completely subordinated to the owner's single, morbid goal. The most significant for the investigation was the garage, which Owen Murphy turned into a real operational planning center and headquarters for years of surveillance. During a detailed inspection of the premises under the dim light of industrial lamps, forensic experts found hundreds of digital and printed photographs of Khloe Reed, organized in 12 massive folders in strict chronological order. The images were taken with professional optical equipment with a long focal length, which allowed the perpetrator to remain undetected at a distance of more than 250 feet from the subject. These images captured the girl in the most mundane moments of her life, leaving the Maine Medical Center, buying coffee at 7 in the morning, or waiting at a bus stop by her white SUV. Each photo was labeled with the exact time, seconds, and date, and handwritten notes were made in the margins about her mood and route. Official reports confirmed that Khloe's surveillance continued uninterrupted for 496 days until her actual abduction on October 14, 2014. Next to the photographs, detailed diagrams of the hospital's grounds were posted on the walls of the garage with a red marker marking the so-called vulnerability zones, the places with the fewest number of surveillance cameras and the worst lighting in the far parking lot of Sector B. During the dismantling of the hidden panel behind the main workbench, investigators seized the main physical evidence, a black leather-bound notebook titled Project Isolation. An analysis of this diary by a team of forensic linguists and psychologists revealed a chilling picture of the perpetrator's warped perception of reality. In his notes, Murphy completely deprived Khloe of her human identity, using only the technical term Resource 01. He described her not as a human being, but as a biological specimen that needed to be urgently removed from the contaminated environment. Murphy's main motive, according to the records from August 2014, was to imagine saving the girl from what he called dirty work in the intensive care unit. He was convinced that her daily contact with seriously ill patients and the atmosphere of death destroyed her primary purity. So he perceived her abduction as an act of supreme mercy. A separate section of the diary, which ran to more than 30 pages, was dedicated to Lucas Brown, whom Murphy called biological noise and the main threat to Khloe. The investigation established that Murphy deliberately planned to discredit Lucas so that after the kidnapping, the police would focus on the technician, ensuring Owen's complete invisibility to the law. The technical drawings found in a cache under the garage floor confirmed that the preparation of the basement at the Owl's Head Lighthouse had begun 10 months before the crime. Murphy had personally made adjustments to the plans for the 18th century tower, calculating the installation of additional layers of soundproofing using 4-inch thick industrial polyurethane foam panels. Acoustic pressure test results were recorded in the margins of these drawings. Murphy used powerful speakers inside the basement to ensure that no sound exceeding 15 decibels would be heard from outside. The ventilation system was engineered with engineering precision and disguised as old rusty pipes in the maintenance bay on the north side of the tower, allowing him to keep the girl completely isolated for years without the risk of being discovered by maintenance personnel. In a corner of the garage, forensic experts found a professional welding machine and argon tanks that Murphy used to create the same signature seams on the chains and modified medical stabilizer. There were also receipts from the Seaside Supply Store for the purchase of high-strength industrial bolts, dated October 11, 2014, 3 days before the attack. An external hard drive with thousands of hours of video footage from a hidden camera installed in the basement ceiling of the lighthouse was found in a desk drawer. This footage documented every minute of Khloe's 6-year captivity, from her initial attempts to break the chain to periods of complete apathy and loss of contact with reality. Murphy watched these videos every night, making notes in his diary about the effectiveness of the resource preservation process. In his later testimony, Detective Graham noted that Owen Murphy's house had no signs of a normal life, no personal photos of the family, no memorabilia. The entire space was a functional extension of his morbid idea of possessing another person as his own mechanism. The eerie silence that prevailed in the garage during the collection of evidence on September 23, 2020, only emphasized the documentary inevitability that this project was the pinnacle of the cold engineering skill of a man who had spent 6 years watching the slow destruction of a person in complete darkness. Every detail, from the thickness of the panels to the length of the 3-foot chain, was calculated with a mathematical precision that left Khloe no chance of accidental rescue without the intervention of an external technical committee. The collected body of evidence became an indisputable basis for formal charges, turning every detail of the garage into mute testimony of organized torture hidden behind the mask of concern for resources. On March 15, 2021, at 9:30 in the morning, the final verdict in case number 48723 was announced at the Maine Supreme Court in Portland, which forever changed the local community's perception of the limits of human cruelty and methodical obsession. Owen Murphy, found guilty on all charges, including first-degree kidnapping, false imprisonment, and prolonged infliction of severe physical and psychological harm, was sentenced to life in prison without any possibility of parole. According to official testimony from bailiffs and journalists present in the courtroom, Murphy behaved in a completely detached manner during the announcement of the sentence, showing no hint of remorse or emotional reaction to the judge's words about the inhuman nature of his actions. His gaze remained glassy, directed into the void above the heads of the jury, which only confirmed the previous conclusions of the forensic psychiatrists about his complete emotional atrophy and perception of the world exclusively through the prism of technical processes and possession of resources. On the same day, at 13 o'clock exactly 30 minutes, Lucas Brown was officially acquitted of all suspicions, and his name was removed from the state's database of active criminal investigations. However, for Lucas, this court decision was just a legal formality that could not compensate him for his completely destroyed life. 6 years under constant surveillance, public condemnation in the press, and the status of prime suspect in the case of the disappearance of a loved one have caused irreparable damage to his professional reputation and mental health. Former colleagues at the Maine Medical Center noted in later interviews that Lucas never returned to technical work. His career was effectively destroyed by the vacuum of trust and social isolation. According to documented reports from social services, Brown was forced to change his place of residence, moving to a remote county in the north of the state, where he lives a reclusive lifestyle, avoiding any contact with the press or former acquaintances. His condition has been described as chronic depression and social paralysis, caused by years of unjust accusation. For Khloe Reed herself, returning to her parents' home did not symbolize the end of the nightmare either. Although she was physically safe under the supervision of her parents, Patricia and Daniel, psychologically she remained a prisoner of those 2,190 days spent in complete darkness behind a locked basement door. The rehabilitation process was extremely slow, as the deep psychological destruction changed her daily behavior beyond recognition. In their official testimony for the documentary archive, Khloe's parents said that their daughter continues to suffer from severe panic attacks at any metallic sound. The mere scraping of door hinges, the sound of tools in a neighbor's garage, or the clatter of cutlery triggers instantaneous attacks of acute terror, during which she covers her face with her hands and asks for permission to stay put, as if waiting for another injection of sedatives. Khloe has completely abandoned the use of any metal utensils in the home, including spoons and forks, as the coldness of steel evokes associations with the 3-foot-long industrial chain that has restricted her movements for years. She eats only with plastic utensils, and her room is arranged so that there is not a single object that can make a harsh technical sound. Doctors have recorded a specific form of dissociation in her. She often stares out the window for hours without reacting to the environment, and involuntarily checks her left leg every time she wakes up in the middle of the night from the sound of the wind. The Owl's Head Lighthouse was officially decommissioned by a technical committee until the hidden basement was completely dismantled, which Owen Murphy turned into an ideal insulation laboratory. The key to the facility, which Murphy once described as lost, has been permanently transferred to the Portland Police Department's evidence archive. For Khloe Reed, however, time stopped forever at 7 o'clock 42 minutes in the morning on October 14, 2014. She remains hostage to her memory of 6 years in a 25-square-foot concrete bag, where her only reference point was the lingering smell of propofol and the monotonous rhythm of a beacon that never brought her hope. The story of the nurse who was found on the lighthouse 6 years later became a documentary proof for the whole world that the strongest prisons are not made of stone, but of cold engineering skill and invisible obsession that can hide behind a mask of professionalism for years. Case number 48723 was officially closed, leaving behind only dry legal documents, empty basement walls, and the broken lives of people who could never fully emerge from the thick fog of that fateful morning on the coast of Maine. Even years after the verdict, Khloe continues to ask for permission to do simple everyday activities, demonstrating that Owen Murphy's psychological chains were much stronger than metal, and the light of justice has not been able to completely dispel the darkness in which she disappeared more than 7 years ago.